Hello, welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay. And my guest today is Tim Mac McCarthy. Hi Mac, we're going to call him Mac. He likes to be called Mac.
Thank you.
And Mac's written a book. The full title is Finding Earth, Finding Soul, The Invisible Path to Authentic Leadership. And again, it's a situation where somebody emailed Conscious TV recommending Mac, and I ordered his book, and I picked up the book, and I just read the back here. And at the back it said, this book is the story of one man's search for meaning and purpose in a society that is captivated by values and beliefs that are assaulting the Earth's living systems and collapsing society in upon itself. It is a call to people who find themselves standing on the sidelines. It demonstrates how pain, loneliness, and some measure of suffering can become doorways to courageous acts that have the potential to illuminate our lives. And when I read that, I thought, I'm going to enjoy this book. I want to meet Mac. So we got him here, and we're going to have a chat for the next hour or so. So one thing that you talk about at the beginning of the book, Mac, is that when you were very young, you and your two siblings were given a corner of the garden as your corner.
Yes. It was called the Little Corner. And in the little corner, we could do anything that we liked. And we did. I mean, perhaps if our parents had ever known half of what we did, maybe they wouldn't have been quite so relaxed about it. But we climbed the trees, we built dens, we strung rope ladders between trees, we melted lead and made coins, we tried to make gunpowder and got something close, and we dug tunnels and slept underneath in the ground in the tunnels. We lived, our imagination was allowed full reign there, and the smell of earth and wood smoke and the seasons and the bluebells coming up in the garden and everything that had to do with nature soaked deep inside us, I think, in those early years.
So in a way that was wonderful. Your parents let you have that and didn't interfere.
Yes, it was amazing. And they loved nature, they loved the gardens. And for them, that was an essential part of a child's upbringing, was that they should be outside for as much of the time as possible. And that you accepted there was a level of risk in that, and that they would come home grazed and cut, and things did happen. Falling out of a tree with a nail sticking out of the trunk of the tree, and it sort of cut in my back, and I landed with this large sort of, what I imagine, at least at that age, was this gaping wound. And we'd just been to the cinema and seen Robin Hood, and in that Little John had massaged, or Robin, I can't remember who did to who, but Little John had massaged salt into the wound to assist his compatriots and clean it. So Julie, my brother, rushed to the house to get the salt, and I braced myself over the lower branch of a tree while he took a handful of salt and massaged it into the wound.
Did it work?
I don't know, I never forgave him. But I mean, those wonderful, rich, textured experiences of just living and relationship and fighting and imagining, and we never wanted to come in. And I still really am the same. Yes. I feel the same.
You also say that when you were younger, you felt born out of time.
Yes, I did. I didn't know that I felt like that for quite a few years, because my life was the garden. You know, I went to school in my Davy Crockett outfit. You know, all these things were just normal. And then as my more adult life began to impinge, I realized that the expectation was that I would leave all these things that were so deeply magical and tender and everything that I loved, that they were childish things, and I would leave them and be an adult and follow a profession. And as time's gone on, I've just had this feeling really that my heart, everything that I really most profoundly relate to, feels like it's of a different time, what I would call an indigenous. There's an indigenous being in me that just loves that way of understanding the world, seeing the world and relating with the world. But of course, I've been born in a different time.
Yeah, and you were in boarding school for I think 10 years, weren't you? Which
Yes.
was quite tough for you.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, of course, my parents had no idea that it would be like that. And it was, however these things work, it so happened that I arrived at a time when there was a sort of reign of terror really going on inside the school that was unknown by the teachers. And although, I mean, I wasn't bullied and, you know, and I survived, but in order to survive, you had to, you know, it was merciless and it was full on, and of course you cannot escape. It must be rather similar to being in prison, because you, through the night, through the day, you're in that place. And the fear always was that if you ever went to someone and you told them what was happening, then at some point the door would close and you have to walk back in. And then, you know, what happens? Apart from the fact, of course, that it's particularly in the junior boarding school, some of the teachers themselves were, I mean, I would call them, one in particular, unquestionably a sadist anyway. So they weren't exactly the people that you would trust.
And out of this, you developed your own skill of storytelling, didn't you? That was your way of surviving.
I protected myself
Yes.
with stories.
Yes.
I invented a complete new childhood background. I used all the imaginings of the little corner. All the stories that we played became stories that I told. And this prevented unwelcome attention. It gave me a role, because I arrived in the Lent term, the beginning of the new year, one term late. So in that sense, I was very conspicuous as a new boy entering the school. So I realized that these, you know, my contemporaries loved stories. So I told stories, and that way I kept myself safe in those early years.
Yes. And then you talk about in the book you went through a period of experimenting life, getting bruised, just wanting freedom from the knowledge I was walking with destiny to some deeper kind of presence in life. So what form did that take?
Well, I got into all kinds of trouble. I drifted towards a sort of the edges of a sort of more criminal world.
Really?
Yeah.
That's not in the book, that.
Well, it's hinted at, I think. It was, you know, I felt as if I'd been, I mean, my father was a doctor. I was raised in comfortable middle-class background. I was loved. But that entry into that boarding school, I witnessed and experienced a complete darker side to life. And emerging, I think that I still, I don't know, I wanted to feel and experience life, all of it. And the other side of town was a fascinating place to me, you know, how do things work over there, sort of thing. Going into those forbidden sort of areas was always fascinating to me. And so there was lots of trouble and lots of getting lost, but I think of it now as the first steps of really trying to identify who I was. Because the one thing I knew for sure was that I did not want to enter the world that the school had invited me to enter. I had witnessed how those in power always seemed to abuse it, how tradition was used to mask sort of all kinds of unacceptable and undesirable things. I felt that falsehood and all these things were just written deep within the whole thing. And at the same time, being the age I am, of course, the whole sort of hippie movement was beginning to move, and all kinds of people were singing Dylan, and all the rest of them were there. So it was, there was a craziness about it, and an idealism that later proved not to have proper, you know, grounding.
Yes.
But at the same time, there was a dream, a longing, really, for a life that had real meaning, a real connection, real sense of having a deeper truth.
At what point did you start to feel you were beginning to find this deeper life with a real truth?
Well, I went to live in North Wales, and I was walking the mountains. I loved those mountains. There was a little group of us. We used to walk all these mountain peaks. A crucial piece was starting my first garden, and another piece with that, actually just before, was a car accident.
That's right.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Yes.
And I was coming home. Well, I'd been climbing a mountain that day, and it was very strange. It had felt extremely difficult. It was just a normal Wales 3,000 foot, you know, small mountain. But I struggled to get to the top, and I was very fit, and it was inexplicable. I couldn't understand it. And later, I got in my car, and I was driving home, and it was dark, just dark. And we were going along the road from Menai Bridge to Beaumaris, and it's called, or it used to be called Millionaires Row. It's a very wealthy area. And the road snakes and curves, and I was in this minibus, transit van, driving along. And suddenly a car comes round the opposite corner, almost tilted on two wheels, headlights, you know, boring ahead. And startled, and I, you know, was just making sure I was all positioned right. And then realized that it was heading straight for me deliberately. It was steering in order to create a head-on collision. And the next thing was just a huge impact, shattered glass, screaming blood, you know, awful, awful scene. And I believe I lost consciousness. And then came round, I crawled out through the windscreen. I was just calling out, you know, I can't remember what. I came to the windscreen, all broken and shattered, twisted metal of this Mini that had piled into me, and there was this woman in the wheel. She looked as if she was probably dead. And it's hard to describe, you know, what it was like. I mean, it was just, you know, it was, everything was jagged. Everything was screaming.
You have your own shock of the accident. You see someone's dead. That's even more of a shock. Yeah.
I kept on falling over, losing consciousness, coming round, dragging myself up. I was searching, looking for help. I found myself in some kind of garden, and I kept stumbling and falling over bushes and trees. Eventually got outside the front door of the house, and I was beating on the door, calling out, you know, please, please help. And a window opened above me, and these two people peered out of the window, and one of them shouted out, go away, we don't know who you are. And I must have, I mean, blood and glass and everything, I was just calling up, and I was saying, please, I don't want to come in. There's been a terrible accident. I think somebody might have died or be dying. Please call for the ambulance, you know. Go away, we don't know who you are. It was the second time. I was pleading with them, begging with them, please, I don't want to come in. I just want you to call the ambulance, call for help. Please, go away. We don't know who you are. And in the end, just sobbing, crying, crawled, staggered back to the road. They never did let me in or call. And some guy found me, though I didn't know about it because I was just lying unconscious in the road. And he put my head in his lap. He I can't remember, found some means to call. and he just held me and rocked me. And I didn't know this until the inquest, when he revealed that that's who he was. And it turned out that this woman had had a row with her lover in a pub some miles up in Beaumaris, and had been, you know, a terrible row, perhaps the breakup of the relationship. And she said, I'm going to go out and I will crash the car in the first car I see, and that was me.
Yeah.
I went back some weeks later, once I was recovered, to try and find that house, because I really wanted to meet those people and say to them, you know, do you feel good about how you responded?
But how did that impact you so much?
Well, it made me, I felt, well, a whole number of things. One was the value of my own life.
Yes.
Really rose up, what it means to be alive. The sense, the knowledge that actually I knew what I loved, you know, that I loved our earth. I love, you know, this extraordinarily, this privilege that I believe that we have to spend a few years here in this. I felt that this, I think everything that had to do with injustice also rolled in on me. The injustice and the arrogance of people who have everything and seem so unwilling to, and so lacking in courage to make a step that would have helped someone else. That was really powerfully with me. And in the end, once I got over being angry about it, I think somewhere I just made a decision. I will live my life guided by the things that I love. And
I'm going to stop you there. I will live my life guided by the things I love.
Yes.
That's incredibly important for people, isn't it?
I think it is.
Yeah. Everybody asks themselves that. I will live my life guided by the things I love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you had the courage to do that.
Yes, the courage. I think I'm a slow learner as well. I walked into so many doors, bruised myself so badly, you know, very clearly going nowhere. That crash and a few other things, incident in the room in London when I was in that dark, rather dark, edgy world. There was a guy with a gun in the room. It was pointing at me. And there was a moment when it was thought that I might have stolen a huge amount of money out of this syndicate.
Okay, yeah.
Me looking at this gun and thinking, you know, every nerve of me alive. A small part of me thinking, this is great. It's exciting. I'm on the edge. I know where the exit is. I know what I'm capable of. You know, I'm alive. And the other part of me thinking, this is stupid, pathetic little drama that is grubby and has no meaning. Is that really? You know, it's like I was living a false life to try and get the excitement. So within all of that came, what emerged out of it was, I need guidance. And I will go and find it now from the people who seem to sing the song that I wish to hear. And that led to the search for some, because in those days it wasn't like now, you know, there were 1 or 2 books out written by Native American medicine people. Right,
because you actually had a journey of about 20 years with...
Yes.
The Metis, was it? The Metis?
Yeah, they were mixed blood Native American.
Just briefly tell us about that.
Well, you know, after the accident, as the garden started, this garden that I created, knowing that I needed knowledge, I needed teachers, you know, I began writing to the authors of some of these books, trying to find these people. And I believe, like so many other spiritual searches, you meet an endless list of thieves and charlatans and money-obsessed, sex-obsessed, power-obsessed people, all of whom purport to be teachers. And I guess they are in some ways, but, you know, trying to find people who really had some knowledge that they could teach me. And eventually, there's so many threads of this story, but we heard there was a group of these people in Britain visiting the stone circles and some of our sacred sites, trying to find out where are those places which are still alive, still humming, still vibrating with the pulse of energy within them. And we are so excited, you know, and we tried to find them, and we heard then they'd gone, and the next year we heard they were back, and we tried to find them, and we missed them again. And the third year we heard that they are in Scotland about to start a ceremony. And we, you know, I rang them and I said, we have to be there, myself and my friends. And he said, well, I'm sorry, we're full. And I said, no, you don't understand, we have to be there. And he said, you don't understand, there is no room. And I said, so we're coming. And we came, and they were just like, who are you anyway? And I just said, you know, we're just some people who love our earth, and we've been through a lot, and we need to be here. So we joined that ceremony, and that was it.
And at one point you went, I think, to Mexico, was that right? And you actually did this week underneath the ground in complete darkness?
Yeah, it was in the coastal mountains of Northern California, where they had land.
Okay, yeah. And,
no, just for a week, and we were off there for you know, a month or 2 months at a time, on and on for a time, and also they came over here. And yes...
just tell us through, because you when I went to a talk of yours a few days ago, you just mentioned that. It sounded intriguing. So you were... Well, just tell us what happened when you were underneath the ground.
Well, in one of the ceremonies is a Kiva ceremony. So this is an underground dreaming ceremonial chamber. And we prepared for the ceremony for several days, and then we went down underground into the chamber. And for close on 7 days, we were in this dreaming chamber. And I mean, you sit there for the first few hours, and you're also fasting. You have some water to drink, and probably no food or very little food. For the first few hours, of course, you sat there and you go through all these levels of I don't know, whatever it is. You sat there and thinking that you're meditating, and then the next moment you're bored, and then you're sort of confused, and then slowly you just go over and through various thresholds, and you're dreaming. The depth that you go to just keeps going deeper and deeper until you're just moving through space, because it's pitch black.
So your dreams at night?
Well, there are all kinds of dreams, because you don't know what's night or day. It's pitch black anyway. It's pitch black day after day after day. You have no sense of what is happening in the world or where you are. You are just floating in darkness. And I love those kind of experiences, you know, and I just felt I'm home, you know, this is where I need to be.
So
this is the little corner.
Of that, but you feel at home with this.
Yeah, I love it, love it. It feels like I'm on the edge. I'm in that place I wish to be, you know, and my whole heart then is given to that. And there were illuminations, wonderful, wonderful, profound insights, which I just knew that one way or another I'd never step away from them. I'd always try and go to that deeper place.
And I know that you again, the lecture, you said that the Indians told you they were going to take you to the land of the living dead afterwards.
Yes. Yes.
So just explain about the land of the living dead.
Well, they teach experientially. They teach a lot with I don't know, tricks and subtleties, and some of it's terrifying and, you know, really intimidating, and some of it is extremely funny and joyful. But if they wished to appear serious about something, they really could do. And so we were being informed that the next part of the ceremony would take us to the land of the living dead. And there was no sense in which this felt like, you know, oh great, you know, that'll be some kind of happy little occasion, you know. This was a real, all kinds of rather primitive fears moving through us, preparing for the land of the living dead. So if one can imagine over days being prepared for this, and the whole feeling, and the what is it, and how will I be, and is this really essentially dangerous? And then the day came, and we emerged out of the kiva, and we were into this pickup truck, and it's 10 miles down the drive just to get out to the road. And then now we're in a very altered state anyway, as it is, and we head into town, and we pulled up at this shopping mall, and the guy stepped out the truck. We came out, and he said, "Hey, behold, the land of the living dead." Yeah. And then, we, of course, our first instinct was to laugh, and then looking at the expression on his face, he wasn't laughing. And then looking at us, his very keen insights, he said, "But be careful. Be careful that you do not now for a moment begin to imagine yourself as somehow superior to these people." And he said, you are charged with walking through this place now and feeling the depth of sadness, of lostness, of aloneness, of a people who have lost all sense of what is sacred in this life. That this now is the new temple, where you come and you pay and you buy, and you hope that it will somehow make you feel that you belong and that you're happy. And viewed from the place of 7 days underground, all of the ceremony, the weeks of ceremony that had gone on before, we could really feel the insanity that this phenomenon that so many millions of people around the world long for, the shopping mall, is.
And another thing that, again, the lecture that I focused on that I thought was so interesting but so obvious was that these Indians who were teaching you, for them, for what is ordinary for us was extraordinary for them, and vice versa. So, you know, these flowers for them would be extraordinary. For us. They're just some tulips and some flowers. Yeah.
And this is so dangerous, I feel, you see. When we begin to imagine that this is ordinary, that we're now, on a very early April, and the spring is coming, and the trees are coming to leaf again. The soil is warming up. My tomato seeds have sprouted. When we imagine and we meet it as if it's ordinary, and not only ordinary but rather dull or of no consequence, it feels to me we die a little bit. We have lost something of such profound importance. And we take something like food, and, you know, most of us, I guess, in our country, even if the quality of that food is pretty poor, most of us go hungry. There will be some, but very few. So we don't know what it means to be hungry, which means that we never ever really learn the value of food. And what food means, you know, when you have not eaten for several days, and then and it's a potato or something, and you smell it, and everything in you is just overwhelmed with the gorgeousness of that smell, and tasting and taking that into you. Water, which is, you know, I mean, they used to stand there with us and they just said, this was now, I mean, this was early 1980s, wars will be fought over water. Water is the real gold, and water is sacred. And how can your young people ever learn what is of value in this life? If they're, and your people generally, your corporation leaders, everybody, your politicians, if they do not know of the sacredness of these things. And that, I feel now is one of the greatest challenges we face. We are so spoiled.
The other thing again that I know really impacted you at that time, which you will come on to later about the community you run and how you run that community, was the chief's play. Is it the Gobi? Is that right? The Gobi Indians? Is that pronouncing that right?
Kogi.
Kogi. Sorry,
yes.
I read that wrong. Kogi. The chief. He pledged not to take any decision that would not take the children of 7 generations into account.
Yes. Oh, so okay.
Is that
so
right?
It is, but this was still the Native Americans.
Yes. No, I understand.
Not
that.
the Kogi.
Oh, they're different.
Yes,
I don't even
that's
know.
okay.
Yeah.
So the Kogi are from the High Sierras in Colombia.
Fine. Okay.
Yes. Well, this had huge impact on me. They said, you know, long time ago, the chiefs, men and women, sitting together, asked the question, how shall we govern our people? You know, what laws would assist us in the process of governing? How can we know already, because they're great psychologists, we know already that power has a tendency to go to our leaders' heads, you know, that hubris is the great challenge. How can we guide and hold our leaders in such a way that they don't forget that they are in service to the people, and that the people as well operate within creation as no better or worse as just one part of creation, because from this perspective we will care and know that we have relationship with everything. So out of this evolved this idea and practice called the children's fire, whereby the chiefs, men and women, coming into council, sat around in a circle. A little fire would be kindled in the center of the circle, known as the children's fire. And that little fire was to remind the chiefs of the first pledge, their absolute commitment. No law, no decision, no action, nothing of any kind will be permitted by this circle of chiefs that will harm the children 7 generations to come.
Which is like at least 150 years, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, and they didn't just mean human children. And of course, you know, even though this is a people who were hunting, you know, as well, but it's very difficult for us to imagine this, but the hunting and the killing of those animals was done from a completely different perspective. So, if we imagine our politicians, our corporate leaders, our school governors, our university vice-chancellors, are all people sitting in positions of power, were they to kindle that children's fire and say to themselves, make that same pledge, no action, nothing of any kind will be permitted to go out from this circle that will harm or compromise the children's future 7 generations to come. The impact.
It's almost impossible for us to imagine that in the way we are with society, we're so instant gratification to think 150 plus years ahead.
Yes.
And yet that's also going to be our downfall.
Yes, and it is the urgent and pressing need. It's like yesterday the IPCC or something, you know, coming out saying those 438 authors of that interplanetary, you know, panel on climate change, intergovernmental panel on climate change, saying it's as bad as this.
Yes.
One author apparently said that he wouldn't sign to it. He felt it was too extreme what they were saying. But what they never mentioned, that's 1 out of 400 and something.
Yes.
The rest said it's that bad.
Yes.
And this is because we have turned our backs on that children's fire. We cannot comprehend it. We will not go there. And that is a huge challenge.
I wonder how we've got to that place as a human race. I guess that's a huge subject in itself.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is, I'm realising that time is always finite in these interviews. So I'm going to actually come back more to your story, because you're involved with this community called Embercombe in Devon. I'd like to talk about that. So let's just look at how you got to that point. So when you at some point when you were realising that it wasn't going to work for you as such, what you were doing in the world, you came back and you worked as a gardener again, didn't you?
Yes, I worked as a gardener shortly after, really, I left London, as a way of getting as far away from the world that I had inhabited, and moving towards what I loved. I love plants, so I thought, well, I'll train as a gardener. And the first place I gardened was, where I got a job, was a leadership development centre, training the executives from corporations. And I was intrigued by them, and one day asked if I could go out and watch what kind of training our company did. And the boss of the place said, yes, he said, you can, Mac, as long as you promise not to speak, because you're the gardener and everybody knows you're the gardener. And in this case, Sainsbury's don't wish to be dished out advice by the gardener on how to lead. I had no intention of speaking, so I just said, of course, yeah, sure. You know. Anyway, something extraordinary happened that day. A fight broke out between these two Sainsbury's executives.
A physical fight?
Yeah.
Good heavens.
Big row developed. Somebody swung a punch. And I was watching this and thinking, my goodness, this is extreme. I had no idea that corporate executive leadership training allowed such things. And I glanced across to the facilitator and I saw that he had long since ceased to be relevant to this group. He had no impact whatsoever. And I decided to break my promise. So because it looked, at least, you know, it had some similarity to the world that I'd come from. So I stepped in, got them sat down, their coffee and their sandwiches, promised everyone their point of view would be heard, suggested that in a few hours they'd probably rather not this story got out, that perhaps there was learning here that might be some of the most profound learning that we would get through the whole program if we could just listen to each other enough. And an hour and a half later, we were all hugging each other and everybody was happy, and I suddenly became a leadership development facilitator.
It's a wonderful story. Yeah.
And then I became the head of consulting at the same place, and then I started my own company, and then in Poland, and then in Russia.
That was Pathways, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And again, we don't have so much time to go into detail, but it was interesting because, again, you mentioned this in the book, that with Pathways, a key person had handed his notice in, and you thought, oh my God, the organisation's about to fail. And then you were sitting in a lay-by near Stroud.
Yes.
Just talk us through what happened there.
Yeah. Well, there's so a key. The really key piece is an organisation. The owners came to me and they said, we have a company that we think is going to succeed on a quite a phenomenal level. We have a set of core values which are deeply important to us. When we succeed, we wish to be able to put our hand on our hearts and say, we did it with our values intact. Would you work with us? So my company and I worked with them for about 5 years, and they made a fortune and sold the company. And sometime later, one of them turned to me and he was expressing his gratitude for the work that I'd done with them. And he asked me what my dream was. And I'd had this phrase since I was about 19 or 20 years old, a garden that grows people. And I just said it. And he said, what do you need? And I said, land. And he pulled out his checkbook and he wrote me a check big enough to buy 50 acres of Devon.
Wow.
And so a couple of years later, I left little Venice, where I was living there in a narrow boat, and filled up my truck, and I went down to Devon, and I walked onto this most beautiful part of Britain, 50 acres of Devon hills and a lake and a stream and Dartmoor. And there we have tried to create a centre which is calling to people from all walks of life, saying, you have a task, we have a task, and that is to answer these three questions. What is it that I most deeply love? What are my deepest and most profound gifts? And what are my deepest and most profound responsibilities? You know, come to our valley, explore these questions.
So love, gifts and responsibilities.
And it's in our knowledge that when those questions are explored deeply, that it inevitably leads people to do things which make their heart sing.
Yeah.
They deploy their gifts, which creation has given them, these wonderful gifts, you know, and they align those to their responsibilities, which is, of course, to their own self-care, but to their care of people, ever widening circles, including nature and this gifted earth. And then, and this for us is the great challenge, is the passivity of ordinary good people, to remain standing as, to remain as bystanders, observers of what is happening currently in our society all around the world, and not get engaged. And we feel that that's our big danger. And so it's basically a call to action to get involved.
And how do you see your community called Embercone in Devon? How do you see that represents the call for action?
Well, people come, it's just a place of questioning, it's a place of exploring, it's about being in nature and being in community with each other. There are children playing and running around, there might be the odd corporate executive, there'll be somebody there might be somebody who's lived a rather wayward life, but are now here and making choices, positive choices. It's a tiny microcosm of the whole situation. We grow a lot of our own food, we have some semi-wild land, so all these tensions between farmland and cultivation and wildland, between work and rest, between being practical, grounded and making real things happen in the world, and our spiritual, imaginative, artistic lives, they're all there. So it's just a place where people go to consider, experience, feel, discuss, and then make choices.
You know, one of the quotes I pulled out of the book was, there are millions of people just one step away from entering the garden and picking up the spade. And it seems that you, as you say, it's a microcosm, yet it's also an opportunity for people. Because in a way, I think there's so many people that they understand and they get that life can't go on the way it is, but they don't know. They feel they have all these responsibilities and they have their family and everything else and their mortgage, and they don't know how to step out, do they?
No. And that's another thing, Ian, because you see, all these people, they're not bad people, they're just ordinary people like us, they're just people. But they've been raised within a culture that says your responsibility is just your own children, your own partner, and your grandparents, let's say. There is nothing about saying our children, all of our children. Nothing about saying it's not just my garden, it is all of our land.
Yeah, and another thing, I'm just pulling out some quotes because you've got lots of great quotes here. This also ties in. As things are now, we are in a war with ourselves, with life, and the lines are drawn. Isn't that the basic problem? We're actually at war with ourselves.
Yes, we are. There's a sort of level of self-hatred, I feel, that sits underneath it, of deep shame. And that, incidentally, isn't that also our greatest challenge with some of our young people who are causing so much trouble, is that underneath that rather ferocious and challenging exterior is a young man or woman who has no sense of their self-worth. If they had a profound sense of their self-worth, then none of that would happen. It's an indictment on the way that our society is folded. but it's also an invitation, because I also feel that there's never been a more extraordinary time to be alive. So the invitation is, you know, that we can create the world of our longing. We can make it how we, if we're brave enough to make those choices and get engaged.
Well, one of the things that I realised with the book, and there's so much I would like to talk about, we only have about 10 minutes left now though, and I will mention this briefly. At one point you went through a series of panic attacks in business meetings, and again it was the way for you out of that and forward again was to come back to the earth.
Yes.
You kind of just very briefly explain that, how that was for you.
Yeah, it was shocking for me. I mean, this is a life, ever since I begun working with the executives, I was speaking to groups, I knew what I was speaking about, I was confident in my work, and one day we're in a circle and we were going around introducing ourselves, and I suddenly started getting all these physical sensations. And when it came to me, I knew I had just a few seconds during which I would be able to speak. And it was very shaming, very humiliating, it was very public. And that then carried on, and it got worse and worse. Now I had to carry on my life, so I was going to meetings, and I'd ask a friend, you know, like you'd come along with me to meet with this executive, and I'd say to you before we went into the meeting, if I start showing signs of a panic attack, just interrupt, and maybe they won't notice, and you just talk for a while and give me a few minutes and I'll recover. But it led to the most hilarious sort of situations where I'm explaining something to the client, I pause for breath, and my colleague immediately leaps in and just sort of takes over. So I don't know what our clients thought, all these very disjointed, fractured kind of meetings, you know. A couple of times I think I invented things like, oh my God, is that the time? I've got to go.
But tell me how you got out of it.
Oh, well, I do think that at a level I was so ashamed, it was very hard to do anything to begin with. I felt this shouldn't be happening to me this time.
Of course.
Eventually, I began doing something about it, and I went and visited a program which was where they were addressing stage fright, because I thought maybe that would be a way in. This is some form of stage fright. It helped, but it didn't really get to the root of it. And then I heard that there was this guy, Jonathan, who was quite an exceptional, I don't know if you'd call him a psychotherapist, but somebody working deeply with people, helping them unfold and things that were troubling them. And I met with Jonathan, and I would say that in the very first session, I began to feel different. It's as if somehow through facing this fear and coming into dialogue with this guy who has huge skills in the questions he asks and the way that his insights, I began to feel this whole weight moving off me. Within about 2-3 months, I was speaking again, and even though I carried on for a couple of years, and he's still a dear friend, he's a colleague now as well. But it was that meeting, which is also, I don't know whether if I'd met someone else, it would have had the same effect. But this wonderful thing of cometh the time, cometh the man. But
you also talk in the book about how going back to the land and reconnecting with the garden was important for you in that situation. Yeah.
Yes. You see, threaded with this all the time was then the realization that, for me at least, everything that brings me stillness, that helps me find myself again, that connects me, is with nature. So by going back into the garden, you know, working in that way, feeling the sun and the rain and the energy of plants, and being in that place, I felt I was being tutored and healed. And I still feel like that. I consider my garden is where I go to pray, you know, in the sense that I turn earth, you know, I just, in the company of these wonderful beings that we call plants and earth and rain and sun and wind, and I feel restored to myself. And I guess it's not like that for everybody, but my gosh, it's opening. It's a feeling of almost undressing and becoming naked there with creation. Tears flow easily in that place, and joy as well, and laughter. Yeah, it's a good place.
We have about 3 minutes left. Just tell us a bit more about Embecombe, the community.
Well, there's a few of us that live there. Most come, stay a while, and move on. There's a program called Heart of Leadership for corporate executives, which will be launching this summer. Our main public program's called The Journey, and these are just adults from all walks of life who come, irrespective of where they are on their trail. It seeks to help them get across that threshold to a deeper engagement with life through those 3 questions. There's a program called Catalyst, which is for 18 to 25-year-olds, and it's really saying to them, your whole life sits there ahead of you. You know, what are the choices that you could make now that you would later say, I'm so glad that I did that, you know, that it set me off on that right track. And then there's all kinds of other things around parenting and how we parent, and the realization that so many of us parent unconsciously rather than trying to become conscious in the way that we parent. There's all manner of different things, but within all of them, people go out into the land, work in the woods, work in the gardens, work together in the kitchens, creating food, sharing that food, building things together, playing, having fun, making music. It's somebody, you know, it's not exactly, I wouldn't call it mainstream, but it's certainly not side stream. We like to call it broad stream. It's an invitation to people, all walks of life. Come along, you know, be in this place. Let's discuss.
I understand that you still have this principle that you learnt from the Indians about having every major decision you make takes into account 7 generations.
Yes.
The effect that you make.
Well, truthfully, that's what we attempt to do.
Okay.
And, you know, I think as soon as you set the bar that high, you're constantly confronted with your own limitations and the fact that we make compromises and all the rest of it. But we do endeavour to live in that way. And we endeavour to make those decisions. So you cannot, I mean, if you're at Embecombe and in our management team or any key position, you have to commit to ongoing deep personal work as part of the commitment of being at Embecombe. And, you know, on all kinds of our programs, we include teaching which is all linked to people's personal development. We refer to it as the twin trail, the inner path of your own self-healing, self-growing, self-development, and the outer trail of having effect in the world. And those two, like two spirals, like the double helix, there for all time. So it's as relevant when you're in later life as it is when you're young.
You mentioned about setting the sights high. Unless you set the sights high, my own feeling is you're missing in life somewhere, because you might fail, you might not always be harmonious, but go for the highs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then the only thing that you could ever call failure is giving up.
That's a good observation. Yeah. I'm afraid we have to give up in one way because the clock has beaten us, and we have the finite thing of time. So thank you very much again for coming in, Mac.
Thank you.
Mac's book by Tim McCarthy is Finding Earth, Finding Soul, The Invisible Path to Authentic Leadership. And thank you everyone out there again for watching Conscious TV, and I hope we see you again very soon. Goodbye.